Welcome, everyone. I'm Steve Rochlin. I'm going to be moderating this session on digital solutions for climate action, based on a very, very exciting report conducted by the Global Enabling Sustainability Initiative. I'd like to thank so much GIZ and also the Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation, and Nuclear Safety for helping us with this event. And thank you to all of our panelists and speakers. And I'd like to turn right now to a video welcome from Luis Neves, who is CEO and Managing Director of the Global Enabling Sustainability Initiative.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. Thank you for joining us today for the virtual launch of the Digital Solutions for Climate Action report, supported by BMU, facilitated by GIZ, and implemented by GeSI. We are proud to launch this timely and much needed report, which sets out in detail how low and middle income countries can leverage information and communication technologies to support their ambitions on climate action and achieve nationally determined contribution goals. As we reflect on the 5-year anniversary of the Paris Agreement and continue to work towards a sustainable recovery amidst COVID-19, this next hour will cover the extensive work that is already being done to tackle climate change, as well as the exciting possibilities as we continue to harness the enabling potential of ICTs. As outlined in the GeSI's Digital with Purpose report, urgent action is needed to protect our biosphere. Digital technologies are key to putting us on the path to lower emissions and ensuring that we meet SDG targets by 2030. I believe that by having a unified ambition, stronger collaboration, and leveraging digital technologies, we can achieve our social, economic, and environmental goals at the same time. I am grateful to have with us Malcolm Johnson and Norbert Gorissen for the opening remarks, as well as our panel of high-level speakers, experts in their fields, who will be giving us their insights on the relevant issues raised in the report. I am sure it will be an enlightening hour, and I look forward to the outcomes. Once again, thank you to everyone who made this report possible, and thank you also to the participants on this call.
Wonderful. So now I would like to introduce Malcolm Johnson, who is Deputy Secretary General for the ITU. Malcolm, do you have a few remarks you'd like to make?
Thank you very much, Steve, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to participants. So I'm very pleased to add my welcome to this launch of the Digital Solutions for Climate Change report. ITU has had a long and very fruitful collaboration with GeSI, and I myself have been on the GeSI board now for over 10 years. As the UN specialized agency for ICTs, we've worked with GeSI on a number of studies and activities, especially advocating the case for ICTs in mitigating and adapting to climate change in the climate change conferences, to get the message across on the importance of ICTs to reduce global emissions, especially in the high polluting sectors, such as energy generation, transportation, and buildings, and to help in adapting to climate change. I believe that with the industry members of GeSI, we were very successful in getting that message across in the conferences. So this report comes at a time when the world's attention, of course, is focused on COVID-19. But it's important that we don't lose sight of the far more long-term and existential threat of climate change and how the emergence of frontier technologies can contribute. Although we know that ICTs are a contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, given their huge growth over the last few years, their overall impact is much more positive in terms of mitigating and adapting to climate change. And latest forecasts show that the growth in the sector will be balanced out by the energy efficiencies and greater use of renewable power. The question before us is then how we can leverage this digital transformation into effective climate action one that contributes effectively to the implementation of the Paris Agreement, and to deliver on the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, in particular for the low and middle income countries that are most exposed and vulnerable to impact of climate change. So the use cases and the digital technologies analysis and insights in this report give clear illustration of the potential of ICTs to serve the community in addressing these challenges. ITU, we have a diverse membership of 193 governments and over 900 sector members, mostly private sector companies in the telecom and internet sector, as well as academia. And we're working, of course, on radio spectrum harmonization and the development of technical standards to ensure interoperability and to reduce costs through economies of scale, but in particular, to minimize the digital ecosystem's growth. ITU, in collaboration with GeSI, is set out to address these issues and has actually developed the first ever ICT sector-specific science-based pathway to meet the Paris Agreement's goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. So let me conclude by thanking GeSI and the sponsors of the report for this important contribution on how digital technologies can assist in accelerating climate action. And I believe now is the right time to seize the opportunity of ICTs to turn today's digital revolution into an environmental development revolution. Thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you enjoy this session. Thanks very much, Steve.
Thank you, Malcolm. Now I'd like to invite Norbert Gorissen to make an opening statement. Norbert is the Deputy Director General, the German Federal Minister for the Environment, Nature Conservation, and Nuclear Safety. Norbert, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for the invitation. Thank you in particular to GeSI for doing this work and for GIZ initiating it, of course, with our funding, but I think GIZ needs to be mentioned as from others separately here. I think this is a very interesting agenda and a topic which comes really absolutely at the right time. So we're very happy to be part of this launch because we can see very clearly that during the Corona pandemic, and we're now going the second wave, increased digitalization for business, but also for public administration has become a massive push. And there's a very widespread and sudden growth. It's become even more relevant today, therefore, to make sustainable digital solutions also sustainable. My minister already in May this year has published and launched a digital policy agenda for the environment. This agenda unveils more than 70 individual measures that can shape a more sustainable digitalization, especially in the field of green IT, Industry 4.0, circular economy, mobility, sustainable development, consumption, nature protection, as well in the areas of agriculture and water resource management. And this agenda was launched in particular with a view to really harvest the huge potential digitalization offers for promoting and managing and implementing a more sustainable development. But however, going aware with the agenda, we are ahead with the agenda, we are aware that there is not necessarily a silver bullet to exploit the benefits of digitalization for our climate and environment, because we also have to minimize the negative impacts of the digitalization. We still have to dig deeper to central questions. What is the net impact of digitalization on climate? I share the view of Malcolm, it would be more positive than negative, but still I think we need to go deeper and need to look exactly what the numbers and the balance is. What exactly can digital solutions contribute to climate protection? and where are they most effective? And more particular, how can digital technologies and solutions contribute to raise the ambition, which is really very much needed to implement the Paris Agreement? To shed more light in these questions, we entered into cooperation with GeSI, which is a global enabling sustainability initiative, and via GIZ commissioned this report. The report provides concrete examples for digital solutions on climate protection and quantifications of possible emission reductions on a country and sector basis. This gives us a better understanding and a realistic perspective of digitalization as one instrument for more ambitious mitigation and adaptation for efforts, meaning for more ambitious climate policy. However, the report also shows that we are still at an early stage in understanding the full potential and the opportunities. It's obvious that the mere expansion of digitalization as such on a business as usual basis will use up more energy and resources and could potentially be also a driver for climate change. Even if electricity comes completely from renewable energy, we cannot waste it, because electrification of our economy will be central also for all other sectors. So we need to be careful with that. The lack of efficiency in many digital applications, rebound effects, missing dissemination of digital solutions to developing countries, or lacking data protection, these are only some of the many challenges that we need to overcome. To effectively use digital innovations for addressing climate change and its severe impacts, we need a comprehensive understanding, an active management, radical energy efficiency, open source approaches, and adequate regulatory frameworks. In that sense, the report is a very important step forward and a very important basis for the further discussion. I'm looking forward to the presentation of the report and to the panel discussion, and thanks a lot for inviting us and organizing this very important event. Thank you.
Norbert, thank you so much. And now we'd like to hear from Chris Tuppen, founder of Advancing Sustainability, who will share with us the findings of the report. Chris, take it away.
Thank you, Steve. And if we could have the slides on the screen, please. Thank you. And we'll go straight to the next slide. Thank you, everyone, for your excellent introductions and highlighting the opportunities and challenges that we all face. So this report is looking at the nationally determined contributions, the NDCs, of countries, and these outline and communicate the intended climate actions and targets that countries have put forward. They are actually all due for a 5-year renewal this year, and so far we still await 170 countries to submit their updates. The Paris goals require action and innovation in every sphere of society, politics, economics, finance, social, and technological. And in this report, we are focusing mainly, but not exclusively, on the technological. Now, we know that traditional economic growth couples closely to increasing CO2 emissions. And there's a classic curve. Chile, China, and South Africa are already well up this classic curve, whereas India, Kenya, and Vietnam, just to pick 6 of the countries that we looked at, can still choose a different path. They could directly switch to a decoupled trajectory, and we believe that the digital technologies can help them do that. The ICTs that we focused on in this report are a combination of existing and well-known technologies, but also we looked at some of the sort of more new ones coming through, such as artificial intelligence and blockchain. The next slide, please. So we looked at two decarbonisation scenarios. One is called the reference decarbonisation scenario, and this is effectively in line with the current targets that the countries have set themselves around the NDCs. And we should note that that if all the countries meet their NDC targets, then we understand that it will essentially just flatline existing global emissions. So we need to go a lot further than the existing NDCs are presenting. And the ambitious carbon scenario was looking at just that future more ambitious scenario, but even this one was not sufficient, would not be sufficient to achieve the 1.5 Paris Agreement. These are all based around the IEA Energy Technology Perspective reports. And I should just note that all the analysis was done at the beginning of this year, so this is all pre-COVID analysis that we're reporting here. The report focuses on 4 main use case areas: smart grids and buildings, combining generation, distribution and consumption of energy; intelligent transport systems, which allow real-time traffic flow management; improved public transport information and smart logistics, to name a few; Industry 4.0, which enables industry to become more connected and efficient using digital technologies; and precision and other agricultural applications, which can be used, for example, to reduce the use of fertilizers and for better livestock management. Of these areas, the precision agriculture is probably the least well explored. The report also considers the risk of rebound, i.e. the risk of making a system more efficient, thereby lowering costs and essentially increasing demand and consumption. And the area that we feel has the highest risk of such a rebound is in the industrial processes area. Finally, the report also looks at climate adaptation and the role digital technologies can play in adaptation. That's in the report. Unfortunately, today we don't have time to look at that in detail. So if we can move to the next slide, then we will summarize the main findings of the report. In the reference scenario, the total potential carbon abatement through digital applications across the 7 countries and the 4 case study areas amounted to 1.1 gigatons of CO2. In the case of the ambitious scenario, it amounts to 2.1 gigatons. Let me put those numbers in context. The 2014 baseline for those 7 countries across the 4 sectors was 13.2 gigatons, and the business as usual projected 2030 footprint of the 4 sectors across the 7 countries is 21.8 gigatons. So you can see that a 2.1 gigaton abatement potential in 2030 represents 10% of the business as usual projection of those countries. Almost half of the total comes from heat and power, but this is very country dependent. South Africa, which had the highest carbon intensity of the countries we looked at, has the clearly the biggest potential, and Brazil, which uses an awful lot of renewables already, the smallest potential. Just to put, again, some of these numbers into context, the 777 megatons for China of heat and power savings is equivalent to 170 average Chinese coal-fired power stations. So in heat and power, digitized technology is expected to be highly instrumental in enhancing the next big development wave of decentralized, interconnected, and remotely controlled energy systems. They're crucial in dynamic management of demand as well as supply. And it's not just about managing the flow of electrons, but also of money through much more flexible payment mechanisms and peer-to-peer trading, this kind of thing. In transport, we identified two big areas of savings: logistics, digitally enhanced capabilities such as route optimization and maximization of vehicle capacity, and also public transport attractiveness. So in a lot of these countries, private car ownership is still quite small. So the more efficient and attractive we can keep public transport, the less likely people are to move towards private car ownership. In terms of agriculture, Brazil and Kenya have very high component of agricultural as their economy, and this is, as I mentioned earlier, the least well explored areas. So the next slide contains two use cases, just to sort of give an example of what we're talking about here. These are real use cases. So on the left, we have a website called Electricity Map Live. This is displaying from countries across the world real-time grid intensity and generation mixes for electricity. And the example here of India, you can see one state which has a lot of renewables and a low carbon intensity, whereas another state has is entirely generated from coal. So this is the kind of open data access that will be needed to offer dynamic demand side management. And then on the right-hand side, we've got an example of a logistics routing tool, finding that the most efficient delivery route for multiple deliveries is a very complex problem and is well suited to machine learning. This example from the Glanbia Food Group have used a set of software that learns from previous trips, looks at things like the weather, and identifies the optimum routing for the trucks, and they found 10 to 15% savings overall. So let me now turn to the challenge about digital technology's own footprint. And the next slide, please.
And 2 minutes left, Chris.
Okay. So here we have the summary is that the ITU has looked at the carbon footprint from 2015 to 2020 and found actually there's not been any significant increase. So in other words, the combination of improving ICT efficiency and grid decarbonisation has balanced out sector growth. And it's worth noting also that at the moment, the thing that really dominates the ICT sector energy consumption is a combination of streaming, videos, gaming, social media, and so on. And the digital decarbonisation applications that we're looking at in this report are going to be very small in comparison to those big consumer driven bandwidth hungry applications. So then just to finalise with the key messages and some recommendations. The next slide. The key messages. The key messages are very significant abatement potential here, but it's not going to happen just by increasing digital technologies. It needs to be hand in hand with countries taking the political and regulatory ambition to help drive that digital technology forward. And so the recommendations, 2 slides here, sits around that final point, indeed, that you need to introduce the right kinds of regulation to encourage the applications to flow. This needs to be connected in, particularly in the power sector, with the reduction of coal consumption. And there's always an opportunity, of course, to use procurement contracts to help and facilitate and incentivize this to happen. And of course, it will only happen if the necessary ICT infrastructure is in place, and therefore countries need to have the appropriate incentives to put in that modern ICT digital infrastructure. And then the final slide. So as I mentioned earlier, open access to data. We know from smart cities, we know from smart grids that this is a crucial component of opening up the data to let innovators bring forward the new applications that are needed. And this connects into smart homes and smart buildings, amongst other things. We feel that there's sufficient potential here for digital technology enablement to be a significant part of the UNFCCC process. Agriculture is under-investigated, we believe, and for example, rice cultivation, which is big in the countries we looked at, a lot of opportunity for more in-depth analysis there. And just as a final note, we mustn't forget things like rebound effects. And there has always been a big expectation that online shopping will drive reductions in emissions, but the more we see people getting takeaway deliveries delivered through vehicles and deliveries within an hour, actually we're not seeing that happen in practice. So we need to keep track of the rebound effects as well. So that concludes the presentation, Steve. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Now we're going to transition to an interactive panel session, and I'd like to introduce our panelists. Welcome to Dr. Dirk Messner, President of the German Environmental Agency, Mr. Gonzalo Munoz, high-level climate action champion for COP25 and founder of Tricyclos, Ms. Vera Scholz, Director, Climate Change, Environment and Infrastructure from GIZ, and Ms. Silvia Viceconte, I hope I'm getting that right, Head of Multilateral Affairs and Economic Cooperation Sector for DG Connect at the European Commission. I'd like to open with a question that I'd like to ask all the panelists to answer, and that is that it's been 5 years since the Paris Agreement was signed, and countries are now in the process of updating their nationally determined contributions, or NDCs. How can we link a COVID-19 recovery to these nationally determined contribution enhancement? And how can digital technologies support the challenge of achieving a 1.5 centigrade global average temperature goal? And so, Dr. Messner, if we can start with you.
Okay, thank you, Steve, for this question. 3 quick reactions. The first one is in my institution, we did a study on 130 stimulus package reports around the globe, and the astonishing result was that most of them are focusing on climate issues and sustainability infrastructure. This is very different from 2008, 2009, from the financial crisis. So there is a mind shift which we can observe. This is number one. Number two is that many studies show, also this study, and Chris finished his presentation with this argument also, there is no automatism between digitalization, digital technologies, climate protection, and sustainability transformations. We need to build this missing links, and this is very important. How we think about building these missing links is absolutely crucial. Steve.
Dirk, thank you so much. And then if we go to Gonzalo Munoz.
There. So thank you, Steve. Yes, in my case, I would like to definitely highlight what we have been seeing all around the world on the energy transition, on how much of that is happening in this COVID time. Also, I would say due to the situation that we're living in terms of instability of the fossil fuels, and in that sense, we need those national determined contributions to understand that this unprecedented crisis is showing an unprecedented opportunity, and digital technologies are showing how much of the new energy has to move faster towards renewable. In that sense, we need to see how much of that is connected to the role of the non-state actors, where of course digital business are showing a possibility on connecting their capacity through the NDCs or through the real commitments on activating what is called the ambition loop. So once the business sector really connects to what the parties, the nations are already committed to the Paris Agreement, they can activate the ambition loop by sending the message of this is something that is happening and we're willing to be part of that, and that should be expressed in an increase of ambitions through the enhanced NDC. And at the end, I would say there's also a possibility of understanding how much the users and the citizens all around the world are expecting for both the business sector, or I would say the non-state actors and the nations, to commit to a much more ambitious target. And in that sense, we see a great opportunity on using this new digital world in which we're all living as a platform that will help, as I said, non-state actors, but also nationals, to really enhance their NDCs and really enhance their ambition.
Thank you, Gonzalo. Vera, can we hear from you?
Yes, thank you so much, Stephen. I mean, in GIZ, within GIZ, we have a quite lively debate on how we can use the digital revolution or digital solutions for the benefit of sustainable development and the implementation of the Paris Agreement. And it was also said that we have also to pay attention, as Chris said, about the rebound effect, because we were observing the platform economy and we were asking ourselves within GIZ, well, is that really leading to sustainable development when we see there are even more vehicles on the road? But on the other hand, we have also discovered that there are lots of potentials, and this is why I'm very, very happy that we were able to support this study together with GeSI, because I think it is high time to do a deep dive into countries and sectors, yeah, and to discuss about the potential we might have. And this is why I was very, very happy to see that. And what we also see in many of the countries GIZ is working in, this is in developing countries and emerging economies, there is for sure, I mean, we all know that, a big openness. And let me tell you a small anecdote. Maybe our board of directors wanted to get an update about digitalization, and that was about 2 years ago. And they were thinking it's good to go to California, to the Silicon Valley. And they were told by certain advisors, no, don't go there, go to Kenya. Yeah, so I think we'll have a lot of people who are very open to digital solutions in these countries. And we have already a couple of projects when we go to that level, for example, where we are giving advice to countries and governments about how to use, not how to use, but how to get access to big data, what kind of regulations should govern the artificial intelligence, yeah. We are also working in a couple of projects on data and mobility. It is also an example in the study here, or how we can use digital tools to monitor forest losses or gains. Yeah, but I think it has to be, as Dirk said, it has to be a debate, because it's not automatically, and we cannot expect that digitalization and decarbonization is, you know, just matching, and we'll have to discuss that.
Thank you, Vera. Is Silvia here?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. I'm afraid you won't be able to see me. I'm connecting from my phone. I had some difficulties connecting from my work laptop, so please bear with me. I'm connecting from a very small phone. I think from our side, there's a couple of things I wanted to point out. I think I agree with the colleague from GIZ saying that we cannot just assume that digital and the green will go together, because we have evidence that they are somehow at times in contradiction. I think we are, as European Union, we would like to put the accent on the whole issue of waste and of reducing material waste from ICT, because in terms of let's say of data centers and in traditional forms of production of CO2, we find that data centers are already quite advanced. So I mean, I will maybe go into it a little bit later in my introduction. So, but I would definitely say that we would, in order to make these two, digital and green transitions, somehow complementary, we would think that we need to look at the material side. In terms of least middle and middle income countries or least developed countries, I think the issue can be a little bit different as well. I mean, they have there are very specific challenges there. From the EU side, I think we're quite aware, and if we look at the future programming and the future financing of our external cooperation budget, we will aim to ensure that the programs for the different projects that we finance somehow twin the digital and the green transition together in terms of specific outputs. One last thing, I mean, as you've seen, the recovery plan of the EU, which is for the COVID crisis, is a very large 750 billion package, of which the main pillar is indeed green and digital. So this dual transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Silvia. Let me go back around with a few additional questions. And Dirk, let me start with you. In July of this year, the German parliament adopted the country's coal exit law after the Coal Exit Commission recommended an end to coal-fired power generation no later than 2038. Understanding that low and middle income countries will be working on different timelines for their phase-out dates, how can digitalization accelerate their coal exit plans to meet the objectives of the Paris Agreement in due time?
Okay, thank you, Steve, for your question. Some reflections around that. The first point is, which we need to understand, we have been talking a lot about developing countries and emerging economies need to adapt to global warming, right? This is one dimension of what we have to talk about. The second dimension is that also emerging economies and developing countries need to contribute to mitigate climate change. So this is decarbonization. But what you are asking now and what you are putting on the table here is that how does ambitious climate protection, so phasing out coal as rapidly as possible, I would say, in the European countries and in the OECD, which kind of adjustment processes is this triggering in developing countries and emerging economies. So the point is that ambitious climate protection from a European perspective and OECD perspective triggers structural change needs in emerging economies and developing countries. This is point number one. It's important to think about that. Point number two is then, as we can learn from the report here in front of us, and as Chris already talked about presenting the main results of the report, digital tools and digitalization and digital technologies can help to improve and restructure energy systems which are still based on coal and other fossil fuels in emerging economies and developing countries towards more sustainable, or then at the end of the day, zero carbon energy sectors. This is about smart grids. This is about improving energy efficiency. This is about more flexible and therefore more robust energy systems. So a lot of stuff in the report itself. Emerging economies still being based on fossil fuels and coal production in the energy sector need to move into this direction. Digitalization can help. And my third answer is that beyond the energy sector, if I would talk to decision makers in South Africa, I would argue that coal will shrink. This is a fact because we are going to implement Paris. So you need to invest in new sectors, economic sectors, to make wealth creation and growth work. And we need to bring together this kind of perspective now also with digital dynamics, because digitalization, digital technologies, this is not one sector, this is any sector. Digital technologies, this is like the steam machine 200 years ago. It will revolutionize any sector. So if these kind of countries go into new economic activities, they should start from the beginning. Think about structural change and new investment patterns in new areas to invest in. Link this with digitalization, artificial intelligence, machine learning. In my last sentence then, as all of us already said, this is strongly related to governmental and governance capabilities, because the bridges between digital technologies and decarbonization and sustainability need to be built. And only 3 examples how to build these kind of linkages to make this, as Vera also said, to match these 2 mega trends. The first one is, with a price on carbon, you drive technologies and digital technologies into the right direction. Second point, we talked with our colleague from the European Commission a second ago. We need a strong investment in digital capabilities in public authorities and public administrations, because to govern something, you need to understand it. And the knowledge on machine learning, artificial intelligence in most of our public administrations, and even more so in developing countries, also in Kenya, Vera probably, is still very limited. So investments in governmental modernization processes. And the last point, if you look at the research community around digitalization, algorithms, big data on the one hand side, and the sustainability and energy crowd focusing on sustainability, sustainable energy systems, these are completely separated communities. So we need to invest in research initiatives bringing these communities together. If not, we are not going to see sustainable digital investment patterns and trends. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Dirk. I just want to double check that yes, I'm off mute. Good. Gonzalo, will come to you next. In your role as high-level climate action champion for Chile and COP25, you represent the voices of all business, investors, and civil society. How do you see the role of digital technology in helping the world deliver on the Paris Climate Agreement, especially in countries like Chile?
Well, yeah, thank you, Steve. And I would say it's not only about the connection to the Paris Agreement, but also in these, say, COVID times, right? The digital sector has a really, really relevant role to play on the path toward decarbonization and resilience for any country. In Chile, in particular, I would say the recovery from COVID is very well focused on renewable energy, and solar, wind, and green hydrogen will be in the center of the Chilean economy from now on. And GeSI has been absolutely fundamental in order to help us walk that path. So when it comes to the role of the digital sector, of course, it's about the capacity of the sector on creating and increasing demand for that renewable energy that has shown the capacity of becoming a game changer for many electricity grids all around the globe. In the case of Chile, the Enel Renewable Energy Control Room is also a great example on how digital technology is critical also to the management of real-time demand and supply across smart grids, incorporating a high mix of this renewable energy. So we're seeing that being established and running in our country. But it's also, let's say, digital punches above its weight in helping the world deliver on Paris. The report being launched today shows that really, really well. It's because it's also important in many parts of the world to improve resilience. It's not only about mitigation, but also really improve our resilience all around the world, for example, in power supplies. And the example in the report from Puerto Rico of the more resilient solution with energy storage and microgrids being put in place after Hurricane Maria in 2017 is a perfect example. Those business leaders and investors related to these fantastic projects, like the one I'm highlighting from Chile and the one from Puerto Rico, are those business leaders and investors are helping the world to walk the path towards the implementation of the Paris Agreement. And at the same time, they are sending the supportive message to the nations where they are operating for those nations to naturally increase their climate ambition. And that message, believe me, it's being heard. As Chris mentioned earlier, this links to the need of regulation that in some countries is starting to follow, as well as the procurement and general infrastructure, the capacities of the nations of rebuild with this focus, as Dirk and Vera properly highlighted. We're seeing that, and that is what I mentioned earlier. It's called the ambition loop that is part of the structure of the Paris Agreement. So there's a link in between how much of what we're doing is following the nation's, I would say, legal structure, but at the same time, how much we can do in order for them to enhance their NDC. Also, I would like to mention the great progress of business, investors, and civil society in the run-up to COP26 in Glasgow. Hopefully, you all have seen with my fellow and friend, high-level champion Nigel Topping from the UK, we launched the Race to Zero campaign, putting together non-state actors aligned with science and therefore committed to a net zero world in the 40s. And the latest figures from Race to Zero campaign have shown an exponential growth of commitment. Even in these COVID times, or maybe thanks to it, there are more and more non-state actors planning and proceeding on how to achieve net zero by 2050 at the latest. We need you all. And listen me well, this is no longer something nice to be done. Anyone not committing to actively part of that net zero world that is required by 2050 is formally declaring that it's comfortable being part of the problem. Is any of you willing to be part of the problem now that we have the knowledge, the technical solutions? Citizens are asking for it. The best talent in our companies is expecting to be part of this epic trajectory. And also when the best businesses are being made with the net zero logic. In my role, I not only see space for those business leaders that want to be an active part of the solutions. We need all of you to immediately join Race to Zero and start bringing more actors from all around the world until this becomes the new norm. Just it has happened during this year with the considerations we have taken to tackle the pandemic. It's very similar in that sense. Science is a non-negotiable, so a net zero world by 2050 is a non-negotiable. We really see that the digital world must fully decarbonize quickly all around the world in order to fully leverage its enabling power. As it has happened in many aspects, the digital sector must continue to show leadership in committing to and planning to get to zero really fast. I really look forward to see you all at the Race to Zero as it is happening in a country as like Chile.
Gonzalo, thank you. Vera, let me go to you next. GIZ's work is shaped by its partnership with multiple collaborations and different stakeholders worldwide. Through this strong network, GIZ has supported the German government in achieving ambitious goals in the field of sustainable development. How is GIZ addressing the accelerated digitalization in climate-related international cooperation projects, and how do you use innovation in that context?
Thank you, Steve, for this question. I mean, it's first of all, I mean, that is many years ago, when we started to discuss about the potential benefits of digital solutions for sustainable development and the fulfillment of the Paris Agreement, we also looked for new partners. I mean, in development cooperation, we have, let me put it that way, some traditional partners, but then we suddenly thought, well, we have to talk to enterprises which are busy and in digital solutions, and you also have to find a couple of people who think the same as you do. And so in 2018, GIZ endorsed the principles for digital development and became a partner of the donor community around the Digital Impact Alliance. Yeah, you see, suddenly you find different types of partners. And also in GIZ, I mean, how do we produce, or how do we try to produce innovation? So a couple of years ago, we introduced an internal innovation fund where we invite people working all over the world in different projects and programs which are funded by Ministry for the Environment in Germany or other ministries, and also the European Commission. We asked them, do you have an idea how to render your project even stronger? So this is what we do once in a year, that we invite our colleagues all over the world to submit their ideas for this innovation fund. And what is also important, we have better to understand in development cooperation what type of innovation and tools are emerging. So what we developed within GIZ was a tech detector. Yeah, so that we, in the different sectors, we mentioned agriculture, we mentioned industry, we mentioned mobility and buildings and smart grids and so on, so that we have a good overview what kind of technologies, digital technologies are on the market, and what are they good for, and are they already ripe for implementation in various contexts in the various countries. So that is very helpful for people working on projects, that we have here an internal kind of a homepage where people can get information on certain digital technologies in the different sectors. And well, coming back also to your question to Dirk with a phase out of coal, I mean, that's quite also an ambitious target. And I also truly believe that, I mean, also here in Germany, I mean, where would we be with our renewable energy agenda if we wouldn't use also digital solutions? Yeah, but we still also have to talk to people, as we did when we made the decision here in Germany to phase out coal, because you have to go about a just and fair transition. So you need a dialogue with the people who might lose their jobs, and to give them hope and perspective how to find in other sectors new jobs.
Thank you, Vera. I appreciate that. Silvia, let's go to you. With the EU's Green Deal presenting a plan for a dual transition of a more sustainable and digitalized EU recovery, how has digitalization shaped the EU's policy strategy and design processes for climate change related issues?
Thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, for a long time we felt that the green and the digital tracks were somehow on separate tracks, but they've now been brought together, and we deem that digital technologies are crucial for the EU to become climate neutral by 2050, which is the goal that was set in the European Green Deal. Our estimates, which we're aware are not the same as everybody, necessarily as everybody else's, but we estimate that the ICT sector accounts for 5 to 9% of electricity use and more than 2% of global greenhouse gas emissions, which is as much as all air traffic. But at the same time, technologies could help reduce emissions by 7 times more than the amount created by the ICT sector, and reduce the global emissions up to 15%. We think also that ICT has to be part of the whole greening process, whether it's in precision agriculture, so to reduce the waste of resources there, or in ensuring stability in electricity grids that rely on alternative sources of to fuel for producing electricity, whether it's in digitalization of manufacturing, or in having some kind of blockchain applications between houses that share energy. As I think I mentioned earlier, I mean, there's of course 2 aspects to the production, let's say, to the dirty footprint of digital. One is the energy consumption, for example, of large data centers, where we think there's perhaps a bit less to be done, because the very large corporate data centers are already quite independent in terms of their energy production. They use solar panels. The old data centers are more energy intensive, but we can work towards a better use of their energy. And the EU has produced a code of conduct on green procurement for data centers, which is of course something that we would share as a best practice, or as a guide for countries that would like to also engage in green procurement. I think our main issue at this point is that of material and waste of material, because consumers are now producing more and more electronic waste. So in that, we think that there is a bigger challenge ahead of us. Our strategy for twinning digital and green is based on a series of actions. For example, the possibility to boost the EU's ability to predict and manage environmental disaster. Probably some of you have heard of the Destination Earth initiative, which is the idea is to create a digital model of the Earth to improve the ability to predict extreme weather patterns. A stronger measures to support the circular economy. As I said, for us, the biggest challenge ahead of us is that of reducing electric and electronic waste, and to improve rules to make devices last longer. So to reduce the planned in life expectancy of devices by allowing them to be easier to repair and to recycle. I think I've already mentioned our objective on making data centers and ICT infrastructures climate neutral by 2030. I think maybe the last thing I wanted to mention is that we would like to take advantage of artificial intelligence, 5G, cloud and edge computing to ensure that we use digital technologies to better deal with the climate change and protect the environment. Thank you.
Silvia, thank you so much. So I want to thank, we've come to the end of our time. I want to thank so much all the speakers, all the panelists, all the participants who've been listening and watching, and also acknowledge BMU and GIZ for their support and development of the report and for the report launch. Please be in touch with those organizations and also with GeSI, the Global Enabling Sustainability Initiative, if you have any questions or would like to participate and find out more about this very, very important research. Thank you so much, and everyone be safe.